governance institutions or systems are not always stable. Sometimes they experience instability that make them not function properly. So today I want us to focus our attention on instability in systems of governance. We want to understand what is meant by instability. We also understand some of the drivers of instability. But above all, we want to endeavor to also understand some of the remedies to instability in systems of governance. Instability refers to the unsteadiness, unpredictability, and volatility within a governance or political system. It is characterized by high risks of leadership changes, social unrest, or policy instability. It has various ways of manifestations, including coups, and coups here could be military or civilian coups, violent protests or riots, as well as intense political polarization. And this one leads to erosion of governance. Quite a lot of governance systems exist, but the extent to which they fulfill the functions for which they were established remains completely impossible because of the instability. So when you talk of instability, we are saying that the government, the system is not stable. It's not steady. You cannot predict what would happen tomorrow. It might change today, it might persist tomorrow, but in a different form. It is volatile. In other words, it does not assume a single definitive form. Changes come in many ways. So it is also an issue that concerns governance, because if a governance system is unstable, then it means it portends bad for citizens that depends on such a governance system to get services. And again, the system too might also find it difficult to legitimize its role and therefore to be seen as being responsive to the needs of citizens. Several causes have been put forward as to the causes of instability in governance. One of them is economic crisis. And economic crises are common stimuli to revolutionary outbreaks. Crises produce material scarcity and deprivation and a sense of insecurity and uncertainty about the future. It also aggravates relationships among social classes. Severe national economic crisis, therefore, aims or works to discredit the existent leadership and the present regime, so that when citizens feel that they do not have access to essential services and essential items, then they question why a given governing elite or system needs to be in place. Because one of the foremost functions of a government system is to ensure that it provides services, it provides goods to citizens at reasonable costs. The absence of this, therefore, leads to questions about the legitimacy of such institution, and that therefore might lead to instability. Instability also exists because of structural weaknesses. And when you talk of structures, they relate to the processes of governing entity in meeting the demands placed on them. And governance systems suffer violent breakdown when channels of communication fail to function effectively. They also fail when institutional structures and processes fail to resolve conflicts between and among competing groups. Further, when the system ceases to be viewed as responsive to the concerns of citizens, again, that system now fails. For instance, we have courts of law, and if courts of law are not independent to the point that the judgment they deliver citizens see as fair, then with time, citizens may lose faith in such institutions, and in the process now, they might resort to using other means other than the legal systems to resolve differences between them. And such means now usher in what we call the law of the jungle. And when the law of the jungle now arises, what it means, therefore, it's about the might becoming right. The strongest prevails, and the weakest are vanquished. Such a system cannot in any way be considered to be stable, and therefore structural weaknesses remains one of the foremost causes of instability. Take the case of Kenya, for instance. Before the enactment of the current constitution, that the old constitutional order allowed the president to be sworn anytime once election results have been announced. The case in point was in 2007 when President Kibaki re-elected under circumstances that were considered as not transparent, was sworn early in the night, a move that was meant to scuttle any effort by the opposing parties to challenge the validity of such results in courts. What then ensued was widespread violence in the entire country. Amid that, the framers of the new constitution now stipulated structures that ensured that there is a reasonable time between the time when a president is announced and when he or she is sworn in. And that time, therefore, allowed the dissatisfied party to contest the results in a court of law. Indeed, in 2013, we had the matter taken to court. 2017, 2022, all that matter was taken to court. In 2017, the courts agreed with the losing side that indeed elections were not free and fair, and therefore nullified the election, culminating into a new elections. Therefore, the strength of these institutions enabled the country to remain stable, despite dissatisfaction as to the outcome of the electoral process. But if we were to have a system that was weak, then obviously a dissatisfied party could have resorted to other means, and the response of the state also could have been violence that now could have led to the widespread violence in the country. Another important cause of instability in governance systems is the problem of legitimacy. What do we mean by legitimacy? Legitimacy is the extent to which citizens believe that a governing entity has a mandate to be in position of authority and responsibilities, and governments suffer their gravest handicap when they must govern without consent or when the legitimacy of the regime is put into question. And problem of legitimacy may be due to prolonged civil war or tension among different national or ethnic groups. And the problem is often most acute where there is a pretender to the throne, a government in exile, a neighboring state sympathetic to a rebel cause. We have had these problems within the region. For instance, in Ethiopia, South Sudan, Sudan, Somalia, DRC Congo, and even Burundi. Recently, Uganda held election, but whose outcomes was doubted as being legitimate. Again, Tanzania too had its elections whose outcome again was considered illegitimate. And therefore, there is the sense of instability, because each time a leadership is being reminded they are not in office by virtue of the strength of the voters, but by virtue of the forces of the state, which they employed to manipulate the citizens to have election results declared in their favor. So legitimacy is a very huge concern. And when a system does not get the broader support of the citizenry, then anytime such citizenry might rise up and question the authority. And that case, therefore, violence might ensue, and that can create problems in terms of delivery of services. Another important cause of political instability or instability in governance system is what we call lack of appropriate political behavior. A governance system persists when there are well-established open channels of political action and settled procedures for resolving grievances. The presence of these structures allows change to occur in peaceful ways. However, the absence of these structures inhibits the development of open methods of citizen participation in public politics, thus leading to tension between the government and the people. Intolerance to civic behavior, such as strikes, boycotts, and mass demonstrations, often lead to political instability. What we mean here is that we need a system that supports freedom of expression, that supports human freedoms, human rights. And when that kind of system is there, then that is a political behavior that everybody else enjoys and espouses. So that things such as demonstrations, be it by students, be it by workers, mass demonstrations against certain decisions made by the state, they need to be tolerated, because through that, citizens are able to air out their anger, their grievances, and state institutions or governing elite are able to understand what citizens mean, what citizens' concerns are, and then come up with remedies. But a situation where such kind of freedoms are intolerated, the next thing is that there will be a violent confrontation between citizens and the state machinery. And that in itself will create an atmosphere where we are constantly on strikes, we are constantly on demonstrations, and that one can discourage investments, can discourage business, and also portends bad for the stability of that governing system. We know, for instance, in some countries, persistent civil strife have occasioned military coups, leading to dictatorship and systems that are not responsive to the needs of citizens. The other cause of political instability is unclear succession structures. That is, how do people enter office and how do people exit office? In Kenya, for instance, we have a two-term system of presidency. A president wins, he serves or she serves for 5 years. Again, he has the freedom to contest again. If he prevails, then again he or she serves for another 5 years, making it a total of 10 years. After 10 years, you exit the scene and allow other political players or other individuals to come in and occupy the presidency. That system, therefore, it is quite clear. It is not possible, therefore, for any individual to think of staying in power forever, because even leaders who get into office when democratic continuously stay in office tends to give birth to dictatorial tendencies, and that now might also lead to instability in such governance systems. So governance systems that persist are those that provide methods of selecting able leaders and replacing them from time to time. Although leadership ability is not guaranteed by any method of selection, it is more likely to be found where there is free competition for leadership positions. And therefore, the availability of established methods of replacing leaders limits the tendency of unpopular leaders to hold onto power indefinitely. Therefore, countries with constitutional term limits for presidents tend to be stable compared to ones that lack such clear succession plans. And some of these succession plans need to cascade to other middle level and junior political positions. For instance, we have similar cases for position of governor. We also have similar cases even for other appointed positions in government, like in boards, you serve for 3 years, you are eligible for another term of 3 years, after which you exit. And for even other state institutions, they do not serve forever. They serve for a given term, for a given time, after which they exit the scene and provide room for equally other qualified Kenyans. And therefore, through that system, we have a very clear and smooth transition between one administration and another. And that now creates stability. What are the possible remedies to these instabilities that we have covered? One of them is institutional strengthening. We must have strong institutions, and strong institutions serve as a primary defense against instability by providing peaceful channels for resolving grievances. And institutional strengthening also implies that courts and police are fair and impartial, and this also helps in cultivating trust in government. Again, proportional representation and multi-party systems should be implemented instead of the winner-takes-all system. Strong anti-corruption drive through strong institutions to prevent pilferage of resources can also ensure stability. What we mean here is that we need institutions that are strong, institutions that are independent. Then we man them with capable and qualified individuals, individuals with records of integrity, individuals with the right credentials. Such individuals will steer such institutions without fear or favor. One of the things that creates instability or agitation for political change or change of governance is perceived unfairness and marginalization. Otherwise, if we have institutions that render services to everyone fairly without discrimination, then confidence in such institutions remains high, and confidence in the entire government also remains high. A system that has the confidence of the public is the same public that protects it, and the same public that ensures and supports it and ensures that it delivers on its mandate. Otherwise, the reverse of the same would create instability in that kind of system. Another important remedy is equality and equity. And it is important to observe that disparities in access to opportunities such as work, healthcare, and education, and other key areas are often the drivers of conflict in any society. Therefore, reducing socioeconomic inequalities and ensuring marginalized groups have a voice in decision making addresses the grievances that often fuel unrest. Fair distribution of job, education, and political opportunities to all regions and groups is essential in ensuring that citizens feel satisfied and feel comfortable with the governing system that is in place. Otherwise, if we allow certain groups to benefit and accumulate wealth and we reserve opportunity exclusively for them, that one will create the perception of marginalization, whether actual or imagined, and it is such perception of marginalization that breeds conflict and violence, because no one would tolerate a system that denies him opportunities to work, to go to school, and to participate in political processes. If that were to exist, then that system will face a lot of agitation for change. Another important remedy that could be employed to forestall instability in political systems is what we call civic participation. And civic participation implies involvement of citizens in the decision-making processes. And involvement of citizens and the institutions in governance help minimize conflicts and tension between citizens and governmental institutions. And civic participation empowers citizens and non-citizen and non-state actors to directly influence public decision making. It also encourages the participation of diverse groups, and this ensures decisions are accountable and transparent, and which can help combat democracy deficits that is often the cause of instability in some governing systems. And by promoting dialogue, collaboration, and mutual respect, civic participation helps bridge divides and build stronger and more resilient communities. Let me take this, for instance, the case of Kenya. In Kenya, for instance, citizens have often gone to court to challenge government decisions on account of lack of public participation. And in many cases, courts have indeed agreed with citizens that certain decisions reached by the government did not involve the public or the citizen. And in such cases, such decisions have been found to be in violation of the law, and as such have often been declared null and void. It is therefore important to understand that the role of citizens in decision making is sacrosanct and therefore needs to be observed at all times. Sometimes citizens become restless when decisions are made without their involvement. Sometimes decisions could be good, but offering them opportunity to understand and to raise concerns helps in instilling confidence and trust in the decisions that have been made. And therefore, civic participation should be understood by those in authority as an opportunity for the authorities to buy in for the projects and ideas that they wish to fulfill. It is therefore important to engage the public, because doing so helps to forestall resistance and also questions about sustainability of such government ideas. So it is important that the public is involved in decision making that affects them, whether at the moment or in future. The other important element or remedy to instability in governance systems is following the rule of law. And this requires that public officials and citizens act according to the established constitutional and legal order. It also requires courts to apply law and judicial decisions based on the law, the evidence and public interest and not in favor of the authority. It also implies allowing freedom of expression, association, and assembly so that dissent can be channeled through peaceful, legitimate channels rather than violent ones. It is important, again, for me to emphasize that following the law by everybody, including those in charge of such laws, becomes an important step towards creating a stable society. The law is meant to be an equalizer, that everybody before it, no one is above it, and everybody is below it. When we all submit to law, then we all become regulated and our conduct becomes confined as to what the law says. Otherwise, a system in which some people disobey the law while others are forced to obey the law can create an atmosphere of discontent. And such discontent is what leads to agitation for the removal of officials or a governing elite that wants to make others subject to the law and they themselves above the law. So it is important for the law to be put in place. Where individuals are arrested for making mistakes, fair trial is important. Fair trial is important. Otherwise, trump up charges, detention without trial, and total disobedience of the law, disobedience of the law on the part of the authority, while arresting or punishing individuals that are thought to have broken the law, that one can create chaos and instability in the political system or the governing system. We come to the end of that discussion. Thank you so much.